Welcome, everyone. We are recording today's session, as I'm sure you've noticed, and you can view it later online once Redmond gets it posted. I'm Michael Ward in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. My co-organizer and co-founder of these sessions with Barry Strugatz is Redmond Entwistle in London. Good afternoon, Redmond.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you all for coming today and joining with other students practicing Tai Chi in the lineage of Professor Cheng-Man Ching. These sessions began many moons ago now as a way to stay connected during a time of social isolation and have since evolved into a forum for sharing more of our Tai Chi practice in a spirit of fellowship and scholarship. We're meeting currently every other Wednesday, so we'll be meeting again 2 weeks from today, same time. Please feel free to share details of the sessions with your students, classmates, teachers. All are welcome. This week, Stephen Goodson, a longtime student of Robert Smith's, will introduce the moving step exercise of Da Lu, a practice that connects the fixed step exercise of Tui Shou or push hands with San Shou or free fighting, and develops the application of the second 4 postures: pull, split, elbow, shoulder of the 13 postures. Stephen's going to be giving a demonstration via video of the fixed pattern of the postures, and later is going to be explaining their connection to solo form principle application. For those of you not familiar with Da Lu and or push hands, just follow along with the video. Stephen's going to be coming back and explaining it. So your first view of it is just to kind of get a view of what's going on, and he'll be back on to explain it more. At the conclusion of Stephen's presentation, we'll open it up to the wider forum for questions and comments, and would welcome any that people would have to offer. As always, to start off with today, we're going to follow a video of Professor Cheng doing the first third of this forum. The video was shot by Ken Van Sickle, and we thank him for allowing us to use it. We're just going to do that twice today, and then we'll go into Stephen's presentation. Redmond's going to announce the postures as we go, so if you want to take a moment and get ready, we'll begin with a little bit of the Tai Chi form.
Preparation. Raise hands. Ward off left. Ward off right. Roll back. Press. Push. Single whip. Lift hands. Strike with shoulder. White crane spreads wings. Brush left knee. Play guitar. Brush left knee. Step forwards. Block. Parry. Punch. Withdraw. push, and cross hands. And back to heels together. Preparation. Raise hands. Ward off left. Ward off right. Roll back. Press. Push. Single whip. Lift hands. Strike with shoulder. White crane spreads wings. Brush left knee. Play guitar. Brush left knee. Step forwards. Block. Parry. Punch. Withdraw. Push. Cross hands.
Great. So we'll go to Stephen Goodson now. Again, Stephen is a long-term student of Robert Smith. He studied not only Tai Chi, but also Bagua and Xingyi with Mr. Smith here in Maryland. So Stephen, we'll go to you now.
Excellent. And I'm going to just pass it right on to Redmond. I've got a Dalu video. We're going to just play a couple of minutes of it. In case anybody hasn't seen Dalu, doesn't know what it is, I figure we'll show it. I'll go through a presentation and then we'll come back to the video and be able to talk to it. So enjoy. That's fine. That's fine. Good. So I just wanted to have a little bit of understanding of what Dalu is, at least what it might look like in there. Redmond, can you put the link into the chat?
Yeah, of course. Stephen,
Excellent. Excellent.
your video is also off, by the way. So.
Yes, yes. I'm about to do a screen share. And if I can do that. It wasn't set up. Sorry about that. So hopefully you can see my screen share.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm gonna basically talk about Dalu. I'm gonna answer some questions that Mike Ward had asked me to address, and then we'll go back to the video and we can talk about it a little more. I gather Mike asked because I had recently written a book on Dalu with my writing partner, Billy Fox, also a brother boxer, student of Mr. Smith's. Professor Jung and Mr. Smith in their Taiji book wrote about Dalu. It says, Dalu is a form of advanced practice which is beyond the scope of this primer. And so I'm going to try to cover this topic in about 30 minutes. So this is going to be kind of a lecture format. So please grab pen and paper, take notes, questions, and all that, and then we'll address those questions at the end. I'm going to cover Dalu's framework, Dalu in the form, Dalu in 13 treatises. I've got some photos, and then Dalu in the overall curriculum. So first I wanted to talk about Dalu in the framework, and I thought, well, let me talk about frameworks first. So we're going to do a step back quite a bit and then come forward on this. A framework is simply an organizational structure. We all know the Roman numeral outline. So this is from grade school, you'll recognize this. And what we know about this is that Roman numeral 1, A1, Roman numeral 2, A1, and Roman numeral 3, A1 are all on the same, have the same weight. They're all about the same thing, right? That's the idea, is it's an organizational structure. So it's not that the Roman numeral outline has some kind of magical abilities. It's not that it reflects nature in any way. It's simply a way for us to organize our information. You can put a chapter of a book against it. You can put an entire book, a movie, whatever you want, and it helps us sort of sort the level of information. So a framework is simply an organizational structure. And the Chinese are masters at framework. Let me show you what I mean. For a framework of 0, we use Wuqi, Wu Wei, nothingness. For a framework of 1, we use Taiji. Taiji produces 2, yin and yang, which is a framework for 2. For a framework of 3, we have heaven, earth, and man. For 4, we have the 4 shapes. For 5, we have 5 elements. Framework for 6, 6 harmonies, 7 stars. For 8, we have the Bagua, the 8 trigrams. For 9, we have 9-stick pattern. This is Low and Ho River writings. It creates a magic square. For 10 and 12, we have 10 stems and 12 branches. For the 12, you might recognize that as the Chinese zodiac. I didn't naturally find an 11, but they can certainly pair them up and create 11. For 13, we start seeing some of that pairing. Here we have the 8 trigrams and the 5 elements, creating a framework of 13. These frameworks can be expanded from here. There's plenty of them. An example is the I Ching has 64 chapters, 64 hexagons, and that's 8 times 8. You can look at Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu has 81 chapters, 9 times 9 is 81. So these frameworks can be expanded in lots of different ways. It's just a matter of how, it's just an idea of how to organize information. For us, we have our framework in 13 postures. This is written in the classics. We have ward off, roll back, press, push, pull, split, elbow, shoulder, advance, rotate, look left, look right, and central equilibrium. So Taiji's 13 postures aren't 13 deadly kung fu moves. They aren't 13 energies that we can apply. They're simply 3 two-man exercises organized in this framework. Let's take a look at the first one. Push hands, ward off, roll back, press, push. Sit in the 4 cardinal directions of the Bagua. They're assigned these trigrams. Dalu is four corners: pull, split, elbow, and shoulder. So Dalu is oftentimes called four corner push hands. Together, the eight trigrams, Bagua, are the two-man exercises. Just a way to graph them out, to organize them. That fits in the framework of 13 postures. You have two of the two-man exercises under the Bagua, and San Shou is under the 5 elements. So that's Dalu in the framework. The next thing I was asked is to show Dalu in the form. And I thought, well, if we don't know Dalu, we might not understand how that fits in the form. So I've taken a slightly different approach to this. And I thought I'd tell you where it is, and we could talk later about how to actually find it. I've taken this from an article I wrote, and it's on the website, about architecture in the form. As a mnemonic, if you take your hand and use the inside of your wrist, your thumb side of the wrist, that's the beginning of the form. Each finger represents a single whip. On the other side, on the pinky side of the wrist, is closing of the form. Professor Jung has 5 single whips in his form. I've never done the long form, but I've grabbed some books and tried to count it. It looks like there's 10 there, so that might be half. I simply don't know. I'm not an expert on that. So with these, with this structure, what you get is 6 sections, right? Between each finger is a section. You have 6 sections here. And each of these sections teaches us something new. So each time you see a single whip in Professor's form, we're covering new territory. So in the first section, you're seeing push hands, right? You have ward off left, ward off right, roll back, press, push. That represents single-handed push hands and two-handed push hands. From the first single whip to the second single whip, you deal with Dalu. You have lift hands, which is the beginning of Dalu. You have a pull, a shoulder, an elbow, a split, and a 90-degree turn. The other sections you can see, there's 5 elements. After the 32nd posture, the third single whip, you see a leg series. You see between the 4th and 5th turning series, that's fair ladies. On 6th, after the 5th single whip to the closing of the form, you see grappling. You see grabbing him, grabbing you, you grabbing him, as far as the function goes. So there's these 6 sections. It's the second section. So notice it's in the first third, the first 2/6. You're covering push hands and Dalu in that section. So just touching on Dalu in the form. And now Dalu in 13 treatises. So these are the 6 pages of Dalu in 13 treatises. It's a thin description. And even if you know the Dalu form, trying to read through this to get the Dalu form is difficult. It's thick, and it's more of an overview than the deep dive. If you get anything from my talk today, it is that you grab 13 treatises off the shelf and read it again. Team Ben's version of 13 treatises came out in '85, I believe it is. There was a rogue copy out there before that we used to read. When the official copy came out, we're reading this. In the last decade, just about, I've read 13 treatises every quarter from cover to cover. So from Madame Jung's introduction to the Song of Substance and Function by Professor Jung, I've read it. I read it simply to try to get the information in me. I'm not studying at that time. I'm just reading through and reading through. And I would ask that you all do the same thing. Grab the book and start reading it more. Now that you've suffered my announcement on that, let me show you what I mean. Let me give you a sense of what 13 treatises has for you. So here's the basic instructions. And that's on page 198. But over here on page 85, so this is the creation instruction chapter. And if you look around, not in the highlighted area, but the other area, you'll see Professor talking about frameworks, Fushi's former heaven arrangement. Outside corresponds to Qin, which is thunder and yang. Down at the bottom, he says yin and yang, substantial and insubstantial, mutually exchange. So Professor is going through these frameworks. He's able to go through this like, I don't know, like Spock playing 3-level chess in Star Trek, right? It's just, he's able to go through these and see them all. But the part that I have highlighted, let me read it to you and sort of spice it up a bit, I'll call it. So the original meaning of pull, now remember, pull is one of the movements in Dalu. The original meaning of pull is to move slightly the opponent's route. The purpose of which is to test the substantiality and insubstantiality of their attack. If the opponent's attack is really substantial, then I pull him. knowing no one who will not fall down. If he absorbs the tack and shows some change, meaning he rides the pull, then I give up the pull and I also change. This is the process of the 8 trigrams mutually succeeding one another. So when he mentions here the 8 trigrams, he's talking about the 2-man exercises that have a specific pattern, that as you go through the pattern, the energies change, the attack changes, et cetera, and it's attacking, neutralize, and go back and forth. So he's talking about this cyclical pattern. If the opponent rides my pull and counterattacks with shoulder, and if this time I really pull, I will no doubt fall backwards. But if my pull is not real, when my opponent counters with shoulder, his attack will be in vain, and attacking emptiness, he will fall down. So this section here talks about the dynamics that aren't in here. So these are the basic instructions, but back here on page 85, he talks about how the interaction is supposed to be. Now notice he starts with pull, which is against the other person's split, right? The person's splitting, he's pulling. So when we get down to the end of this section that's highlighted, the other person's shouldering and you've gone back into big rollback. The next thing you do is split. So this is the entire cycle written out on how it dynamically works. And Professor has put this in here. So from this basic introduction piece hidden over here on page 85, Professor has this set of instructions. In my mind, it's sort of like Professor had 5 beautiful essays on Tai Chi. He cut the paragraphs up and he divvied them out throughout 13 treatises. And so our work seems to be to try to match these up, right? To try to find these jewels where we can connect it. On my copy of 13 treatises in the margins, my working copy, I've got see page 198, see page 85, so I can follow these threads through. So I ask that you grab 13 treatises off the shelf, start reading it, and if you find jewels like these, let us know, because they're really helpful in understanding this and getting some context to it. So this is Dalu in the 13 treatises, and I'll leave it at that. Dalu in photo. So this is what I'm going to touch next. And here's a photo I stole. I didn't steal. This is fair use. I'm telling you where it came from, Texas A&M University. When Mr. Smith passed away, the Smith family collected his material and organized it, and Russ Mason helped get it into Texas A&M University. So thank you very much, Russ. And so I went down there with my assistant a couple of years ago. I pulled every box that was down there, researching it. I wrote a book on Dalu. I've got 3 others in the work. I'm looking for research material. And so I found these photos down there. If you ever get a chance to get down there, it's great. Spend a weekend, pull some boxes and take a look. There is an online catalog of Texas A&M, Mr. Smith's collection, that you can look at ahead of time and look for things that interest you. What we have here is a picture of a professor doing shoulder, and big rollback is being done against it. Another set of photos from down there. So these photos were actually used in the JAMA article, the Journal of Asian Martial Arts, that Mr. Smith and Ben Lowe did. And they interspersed photos of themselves doing the transitional postures. But when I got these photos, I took photos, these images were out of order, and I tried to figure out how they worked together. And what I realized, it was as if the cameraman shot some scenes from the north and then went to the south and shot some scenes from the south. He didn't do that. He simply had the players turn around. Because in Dalu, your backs will eventually be to the photographer. That's one of the things I struggled with in my book, is the photographer kept saying, can I move, can I move? And I'm like, no, take a picture of my back if that's what you're seeing. So what I've done is with this blue line, hopefully you can see my mouse, but the top line, the blue line is, so to speak, photo shot from the north, and the red line is photo shot from the south. I stuck a picture of Billy I in here to do the pull. So I walk through these, professors doing shoulder, and it's being countered by Dalu, big rollback. Split is done, professor steps back into, we'll call it big ward off for the fun of it, and gets into this posture. We start the pull, he starts riding his pull, you get to see the pull here. He's ridden the pull, the gentleman's about to shoulder, professor's going into big rollback. After the gentleman's shoulders, professor does split, and they come back to big ward off. They come back to this neutral position in the end. If you look at the third frame, and you look at the fourth frame, it's basically the same picture. It's just that professor's on the different side. They've done one half of the exercise. If they continue it, they'll be back to what the picture is on the top. So like push hands, this cycles 4 postures of push hands, 4 postures of Dalus. This cycles over and over again. And so I put these pictures together to sort of show photographs of a professor going through the Dalu form, and just to make it clear the camera work and all that. Now I want to look at Dalu in the curriculum. So we saw this earlier, 13 postures. The Bagua, left-hand side, the 8 trigrams, have push hands and Dalu mapped to them. And the right-hand side is San Shou that deals with 5 steps. Advance, retreat, look left, and look right, central equilibrium. So push hands, north, south, east, and west, are 4 postures that cycle over and over again. The 6th principle tells us this, which is in 13 treatises, that says, grass sparrow's tail is like 2-man sawing. The commentary says that we give ourselves up to follow the other as we cycle through like 2-man sawing back and forth. And then it gives us the principle of the saw, which is when we feel resistance, when the saw binds, we withdraw slightly and push forward. So the thing we're learning from those 4 is Tifang. So ward off, roll back, press, push is teaching us Tifang, teaching us how to, by alternating pushing and pulling to sever the other's root, we can throw them out decisively. It's a little magic trick that makes the other person weaker than you are, because when you let go of them slightly, they fall forward. When they fall forward, they're reflexively pulling back. And when you push on somebody who's pulling away from you, both of you going in the same direction, you can push them out. So ward off, roll back, press, push are pairs. Roll back always beats push. Press is always beaten by ward off. If not, you would never be able to cycle through. So as you cycle through these 4 postures, these 2 pairs, each one beating the other one, when someone makes a mistake and you feel an increase in pressure, think of the principle of the saw. Slightly withdraw and then push forward as before. That will sever the root and you can throw them out. Dalu, the 4-corner push hands, is the same idea. It's 4 postures cycling over and over again. And through the use of visual cues, because you can't do Dalu with your eyes closed, you'll get hit in the head or shoulder to the chest. So through the use of visual cues and agile stepping, you learn to move at the moment of the other's commitment. So Dalu, although it's teaching you these movements, it's not about the shoulder or split or elbow or all that. It's about understanding the moment of commitment when he's about to launch. So in Dalu, sometimes we'll fake the head forward, we'll fake the step, and the other is not supposed to move, but wait for the actual attack, the moment that they're committed to come in. When we simply do agile stepping, we step away. San Shou teaches us draw on and touch 4 ounces to flex 1,000 pounds. This is from Song of Hitting Hands. Draw on and touch 4 ounces to flex 1,000 pounds. So the idea that these 3 pieces are teaching you first 2 functions, and then we put them together in San Shou. So I'm going to take a look at some San Shou practice, and the idea is I'm trying to place Dalu in the curriculum. Where is Dalu? How does it fit in the curriculum? I'm going to start with the sequence at the bottom. This is from Chinese Boxing's Masters and Methods. You see Professor there on the left-hand side in a 60-40, 50-50 posture. The attack comes in. What we see is Professor sitting back on that left leg and getting out of the way. By sitting back, he has moved his body off of the path that the attacker in the first frame has picked. By the third frame, what you see is Professor has moved his way out of the path of the attack. When the attacker, at the moment of this commitment, Professor is moving himself off of that line. All this is Dalu practice. That's what you're learning in Dalu, is at the moment of commitment, get off that line, agile stepping. Here, Professor touches lightly and accelerates the guy away, like pushing a child in a swing. In a sense, this is T and this is Feng. The first 3 are T, the last 3 are Feng. So what I'm trying to make the point is, although you learn Tifang first and then Dalu second, when you play with San Shou, you turn them around. You change their order. Take a look at this top sequence here. We have Professor standing in an average posture. The guy comes in, he has a hand high and a hand low, so you aren't sure what's coming in, but it looks like that lower hand might be the thing. When you look at the second frame, it looks like he's going to do a back fist, but it starts to actually spin up. If any of you have done Xingyi, it starts to look like Hung Xuan from Xingyi a little bit there. But Professor's first move, when you look at this, we can see that his feet have changed. The question is, what did he do there? And what he did was he stepped back into bow posture. This is the retreating step into big rollback. In doing that, he moved his body from where it was when the attack was committed out of the way and to the left. He continues to move to the left as he waits, puts the weight in the left leg and moves to the side. Hand reaches out and touches. And this part is what we learned in Tifang and Taiji, right? We touch and accelerate him away. So this part is Ti and this part is Fang here. If you look at these last two photos, and you look at how Professor's body, the arm's fully extended, right? He's catching his momentum. He's pushing the guy away. Chen Wei-ming and Da Wen says, releasing strength is like throwing a stone. All the energy gets out. And you can see that. There's no resistance from the guy being pushed because he missed the target. And missing the target, he starts to float. There's T, and he throws him out. That's Fang. So I tried to put where Dalu was in the curriculum by making the point that in San Shou, we switched the importance of the moment of commitment and Tifang. We swapped them around. So what I wanted to address today was Dalu in Taiji's framework, Dalu in the form, a little bit of Dalu in 13 treatises, some photos, and Dalu in the curriculum. I want to hand it back to Redmond now and to play the rest of the video. Redmond, can you play it with the sound muted? And then I'll just point out some of the things that are in the video. All right. So I'm in a long sleeve. My student Jay is in short sleeves. Jay's going to split. I'm going to ride the pole. He's going to ride the pole and I'm going to pull back. Oh, frame changed. I'm splitting. Jay's pulling, I shoulder. So you're just seeing these postures of the split, big rollback, shoulder, set up in pairs. We just cycle round and round. There's a Tifang done out of it. So he made a mistake and I pushed him away. The mistake was an increase in pressure. In Dalu, our goal is to connect and reconnect at 4 ounces. If we simply did Tifang every time, you'd never get the cycle. You'd throw the person out. And the idea here is to wait for the moment of commitment, right? By visual cues and agile stepping, you're waiting for the moment of commitment and being able to move. Good. So Dalu is an advanced form of training. It's above push hands and below San Shou. It follows Taiji's 12 principles and prepares us for doing San Shou by teaching agile stepping and moving at the moment of the opponent's commitment. Or as the classics say, if others move slightly, I move first. And I like to leave my talks with a sense of, and I think I've done that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. That was a great presentation. Let's go. Russ Mason, I think, had a couple of things he wanted to add in. Russ, do you have something you want to say about the Dalu form?
Sure. First, I want to thank Stephen for his research and for a nice, tight, and very informative presentation. Thanks a lot. And I just wanted to refer to some of the resources. The article, Dalu and Some Tigers by Mr. Robert W. Smith was in the Journal of Asian Martial Arts, Volume 6, Number 2. That was in 1997. If you have that resource on your shelf, you can pull it. And it's got the original pictures of Titi Liang and Professor Zhong, the photo set, and it's got Mr. Ben Low and Mr. Smith demonstrating the transitional movements. And of course, that's available in the Zhongmanqing and Taiji Echoes in the Hall of Happiness is an anthology that was published by Via Media that includes this article by Mr. Smith and many others. And then, of course, Ben Lo's translation of Professor Zhong's 13 treatises on Taiji Chuan has the photos of Mr. Li and Professor Zhong doing the Dalu. So those resources are available. One thing I wanted to emphasize from Stephen's presentation was about the way the jewels are scattered in this book. You know, Ben Lo encouraged me to seek those jewels out and string them together. And just like Stephen, I've been digging them and cross-referencing them in my copy for years. And I appreciate the fact that he linked for us pages 198 and page 85. That's very valuable information. So thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.
Is Bob Goodson on? Bob, if you wanted to make a comment before we open it up for questions. I'm going to take that as he's not on. So yeah, so let's go ahead. Thank you again, Stephen. I thought that was a really great presentation, really very concise, very well explained. So let's go ahead and go. I have a hand up with Carol Schmidt. Carol, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you. This is very simple-minded, so forgive me for my simple-mindedness here. But back when I was at Xizheng, I remember hearing it said around Xizheng that this book, this one, the one with Robert Smith, The Supreme Ultimate Exercise for Health, Sport, and Self-Defense, was disowned in a certain sense because that was backwards, you know, that the pictures, the photos were reversed, but that the foot diagrams were still okay. That was what I heard back then. Now, so I was a little puzzled by the picture you sent out, Michael, or whoever sent it out, Mike Ward, with this week's announcement. You sent pictures of 8 postures that are on page 108. You referenced even page 108 of this book. And I understand the first 4 postures on the top of the page, they're just ward off, roll back, press, and push. But I don't understand the 4 pictures on the bottom of page 108. First, he's doing it on the very far right side. He's looking strike with shoulder. And then comes a photo. I don't know what posture that is. It does not look familiar to me. And then there seems to be 2 versions of white crane. So I just don't understand what those pictures are on the bottom of 108 that you referenced in this week's announcement.
Well, Carol, if I can, remember there's no such thing as a dumb answer. So I'm going to attempt to take this on. My understanding is that Professor, in the first 2 postures on page 108, the left hand is in a pull where the right hand isn't. So the right hand's emphasizing elbow, the left hand's emphasizing pull. In Dalu, the second picture is actually outside of the arm being raised on the right hand so high. That's actually a pull. So he's doing the beginning of split with the right hand, getting ready to go into brush knee, that's split. The second one I would say is the pull from the Dalu form, and then you have elbow and you have shoulder. So split.
I don't recognize elbow. He's got his hand, his right hand looks like it's in a fist there. I don't recognize this posture from the form that I learned.
That's very interesting, because what you find before Professor inserted the shoulder posture, there were no Dalu named postures in the form. You don't see split, pull, elbow, and shoulder in the other traditional family forms. Professor put in the shoulder posture, pointing out that that section is Dalu, right? Those are the 4 postures of Dalu. You have the left hand, you have a pull, you have a shoulder, you have an elbow rising up, and then you have a split and a 90-degree turn there. So you aren't going to see the postures named in the form. Professor gives us the hint by calling that one posture shoulder, but really that was from lift hands into stork spread wings. There was no shoulder posture there. professors just, the shape was there, but professors pointing it out as a posture for us, a picture perfect moment.
So this one here is not one I ever used, the second from the right.
You could think of it as down block parry punch.
Yeah. So it's not in sequence with these others.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay, that's right. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
The Dalu refers to as actions, and the first 4 is postures. Postures you see in the form, these are actions within the second half. Yeah,
Okay,
good question.
thank you very much. Thank
Good
you.
question. Yep.
I think Liam, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, about the last thing that you said. I was very impressed with your hand diagram as a way of saying what's being taught in particular parts of the form. But I think if I remember correctly in that diagram, Dalu movements came after the first single whip. But what you just said was that they come before the first single whip.
Well, you do. Let's catch and make sure we're talking about the same single whip. So you start with preparation. You go through the 5 principles. Then you go to the breathing. You're doing slow, inhaling when you're floating, exhale when you're sinking. The first thing you do is ward off left. So that's single-handed push hands.
Yep.
Then ward off right, roll back, press, push. That's push hands. And then you have the single whip.
You're using. I understand. I sometimes use single whip as a breaking point in the form also. I was misoriented. I want to say that I'm impressed with your work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Watching the film, though, there's a question about the way that the technique is applied, which raises questions in my mind. The technique where the person's hand is coming down from above, I've always thought of as being ride the tiger. Sometimes at Shizhong, we refer to it as pie in the face. And the technique was essentially like clotheslining. That is, the person is moving forward, their face runs into your hand and they fall as a result.
You are correct. In that exchange, Jay was a beginning student on Dalu, and his hand was cycling up. It should have been, I think Professor called it a lightning palm. Like it should go right to the face, and you see that in the photos of him doing the Dalu form. It is pie in the face. I love that example. And if I can, I'm going to steal that from you.
I would love it. It was given to me, please.
So stealing from you is stealing twice. Excellent.
Use it in good health.
Yes, thank you, sir.
So
it's if I can, it's those sorts of things that are helpful in the oral tradition, right? Is getting a metaphor, an example, a simile, something like that, pie in the face, that really helps explain the move. So I appreciate that very much, sir. Go ahead.
Well, the second one was about essentially the same thing, and that is once the elbow comes up past the shoulder joint, then the shoulder disassembles, and you no longer have the connection between the hand and the earth. When you do pie in the face, the shoulder, the elbow is not above the shoulder, so you don't get that disconnection, and you can bring the strength of the earth out in the palm of the hand.
Yeah, I would liken this to the football player versus the baseball player, right? The baseball players are always ruined. The pitchers are ruining their shoulder because they're bringing their hand back and they're trying to get as much resistance as possible. The football player will point the elbow when he releases the ball, keeping the shoulder down, protecting it. That's great advice, and you are correct. Good eye, sir.
Well, thank you very much for an excellent piece of work. I will also be stealing your hand for the 5 sections.
Take my hand, sir.
Great, thank you. Anybody else, questions or comments? Some of you who are possibly seeing Dalu for the first time, do you have a sense of what's going on with it? Is there anything we can do to further clarify it for you? Katie Cheng, go ahead, Katie. You there, Katie? There you go. Go ahead, Katie. We're not hearing you. You might need to unmute.
Thank you. I'm teaching those, sometimes teaching the student before learning Dalu, teaching 13 treatises, because that's Zhang Sanfeng started Tai Chi, right? It's the 13 treatments. Inside have split elbow, you know, those all 13. It's a 8 step and 5五行八法 make a 13. Okay, and the elbow up is part of Tai Chi's deflect down punch. You use elbow, you know, and punch. And the split is sideways to hit the neck here. So it's the palms is not facing the face. It's a sideways palm. Palms, you know, I don't know. You can,
Like a
okay,
chop.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, strike. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I teaching the student the certain treatment with a mirror image also, right and left, to practice. Yeah,
Very good. Thank you.
thank you.
Great, thanks, Katie. Maureen, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Maureen.
Yes, can you talk a little bit more about the corner aspect? Like, do you have to make your commitment at a corner?
No. And I think you're touching on something that I found very interesting, is that a dalu is called 4-corner push hands because it fits on the trigram in the corners. But dalu itself does have very sharp corners that it takes, right? So that you're being pulled and you turn 90 degrees into that pull. But oftentimes, as you may have picked up in the video, and there's a link in the chat so you can look at it later. But after the pull, we'll turn and we'll come to toe, right? We'll bring the toe up in a stork spreads wings sort of fashion, and then we'll start. And so sometimes we'll fake a head move, we'll fake a leg to see if the person steps back. Because if they step back in the big rollback, they're a static target, and you get to hit them and push through. So it doesn't have to be made at a corner. It's just like push hands, you're obligated to push and press, right? While the other guy tries to neutralize. In dalu, you're obligated to split, ride the pull, and shoulder. So you're playing the bad guy. You're trying to hit him, you're trying to shoulder him. So that chop to the neck and that shoulder are the bad guy giving real energy. And your goal is to step back and reconnect at 4 ounces, get out of the way, move that silhouette. To sort of ride on Liam's earlier wonderful statement of the pie in the face, think of it as being a matador, right? As a metaphor, when you're there and you're holding a cape. To the bull, you look like another bull, right? The side of your body there is out there. So the bull's thinking he's going to come in and he's going to T-bone that side of the other bull. So when he runs into nothing, his momentum carries him forward and he stumbles, right? So that's the idea, is that when you turn and you wait for the attack, Professor says in Treatise 1, I think it is 1 or 2. So that you turn and wait for the attack. Once you see it's committed, you don't even have to figure out what it is. You know he's going to hit your silhouette. You're just simply going to move that silhouette. So that's sort of the idea, is that anytime through there, he can do it. In fact, we'll change sides dynamically. We'll do a split, and then we'll just simply do another split, and that changes sides and stuff.
Forgive me for speaking out of turn, but this is precisely what San Shou says about thwarting the plans of your opponent as being the best way not to fight.
That's an interjection. Thank you very much, sir. I do appreciate it. Maureen, did we answer the question?
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
George.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. That was a very inspiring explanation of things that we've been wondering about for quite a while. So I have 2 questions. One is, I understood that Professor didn't teach this in New York, but he clearly taught it in Taiwan, and I was wondering if that's true, or so that's just a historical question. And the second question, if I can ask it right now, is for both you and Liam. When you were talking about the shoulder here, if this is too high, it causes problem, but then we also have this posture, and I wonder if that's a different maybe function that makes that not out of Tai Chi principle, you could say.
Sure. Can we answer those in reversed order? Liam, your hand's up. I think you're going to go after the shoulder one first. So let's see if that's true.
Okay. It's absolutely the case that the shoulder stays down. If
The hand up, but the shoulder down.
Yes,
and
this
shoulder
is
down.
the posture that you're probably in when you think, okay, well, the shoulder must be raised. No, this is completely unnecessary tightness. You can
Yes, well,
sink
that
the
is also
shoulder.
what I've taught and been taught, to leave this low.
This is not what Ben taught.
Yes,
So if you move your elbow forward, then it's very easy for both shoulders to be down and still make the slot between the fingertips and the thumb. So it's the fact that the shoulder isn't far enough forward. It's that you're doing it like this instead of doing it like this.
yeah, we can feel that pull.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So that was the second question first. To answer your first question, my understanding is that the Dalu form was taught, shortly in New York, and not much after that. And I think there's different opinions on it. I would, if I
saw it done in New York.
You saw it in New York?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my understanding is that it was, but not a lot of people were exposed to it or whatever. But Professor's work he calls simplified Taiji. He doesn't say I simplified the form. He says I simplified Taiji. And I think he might have, this is all, supposition on my part, but I think he might have been using the sword form to teach the things that we learn in Dalu. Now, if you think about it, if you did that, you could literally, thank you, Liam. Liam either slammed his thumb with a hammer or he's agreeing with me.
That's exactly what I believe.
Excellent. Thank you. And this is supposition. Realize that the things you're after is a visual cue. So you have to have your eyes open. I would recommend that with sword. Thank you for the smile. Yep. And agile stepping. So in both cases, you're picking up with the sword. Realize, if I can be so bold as to claim this is a true statement, Taiji sword is not about fighting with the sword. It's about fighting against a sword, right? In other words, if that razor sharp double-bladed thing touches your hand, even at 4 ounces, it's going to cut you. So you put something else again. The professor is quoted as saying that you can fight against sword with a feather duster. Anything to touch that sword so it's not cutting you. To always have, like ward off, to always have something between you and the other sword. And then you touch with the other hand and you accelerate, you Tifang from that. So I suspect, and Liam is on board with me here, so we've got 2 of us, Liam. I suspect that sword was being taught to give us the lessons that Dalu was trying to do, right? That the idea of the agile stepping, the visual cues are in it. And if you think about it, let's say that each thing takes a year of form, a year of push hands, a year of Dalu, a year of San Shou, and then a year of sword, and then a year of sword play, right? That you're shortening that method even more. There's an old story from that Mr. Smith used to tell from New York. Professor came to the class and said, all the students gathered and they were ready to listen to him. And he said, "What's wrong with Taiji?" Right? And you probably all heard this. And they were like, "Oh, it's a wonderful art. It's a martial arts par excellence. It's healthful. It's all these things." And they said, "We don't know, teacher, what's wrong with it?" And he said, "It takes too long to learn." So the shortening of the form, if he was using sword to give us what we do in Dalu, he has shortened it even more, right? He's made it even more accessible. So I suspect that that's where he's going. And that's why later on in life, you didn't see as much Dalu, because the sword form was sort of taking the place of that exercise. Sorry, I went on too long, but hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And just as in the sword form, you have to have a root the moment your foot touches the ground when you do the Dalu.
Yep. Good.
Great. Tom. Copy. Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Stephen, I just want your thoughts. We do Dalu in St. Louis, taught by Mr. Smith and then corrected by Mr. Lowe. And I just want to go over a training technique we do and get your thoughts on it, because
Tom, it's very, your voice is very distorted.
Not here.
Do you want to put your question in the chat or try speaking closer or further away from the mic?
Or change mics.
Okay, so we'll come back to, Tom's going to put his question in the chat and we'll come back to that. Susan Lowell, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, thanks. So Stephen, thank you so much. I really appreciate how you point out to us that we've been learning a system science as we've been studying this in terms of the structure and the systems within systems, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, you know, that complexity that comes out of simplicity, that system science aspect is so important. And also that we need to keep rereading 13 treatises because it folds back onto itself and loops back through. I was wondering about the 5 elements and San Shou versus or Xingyi. So I thought maybe you could just illuminate that a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments and compliments. Yeah, Taiji is a system, right? It's 13. These 13 postures are the 3 2-man exercises, right? So there is a system. Reading 13 treatises, Professor Jung, if you don't know it, he gave you homework assignments in there. Whenever you hear him say, and the rest is obvious, A, it's not obvious, and B, you have to sit down and get a piece of paper and map out what he's talking about with the assignments of the trigrams and the postures and stuff. So there are lots of homework assignments. I recommend keep reading it, keep reading it. You were talking about San Shou and Xingyi. I'll dilate on my idea of what San Shou is first, and then take a look at that. For me, what we were looking at when we were looking at the San Shou practice is really from the Song of Hitting Hands, right? The Song of it's not the Song of Push Hands, Song of Hitting Hands. It says ward off, roll back, press, push must be known. That's a prerequisite that push hands must be known. The second line is upper and lower coordinated, the other finds difficulty entering. That's Dalu. So the third and fourth line are telling you how to do hitting hands. Let him come in and hit with great strength. And that's what you see in the last slides, is a guy coming and hitting with great strength. And then it says, draw in and touch 4 ounces to flex 1,000 pounds, right? 4 ounces offsets 1,000 pounds. Read page 9413 treatise, 93, 9413 treatises, you'll understand that 4 ounces to flex 1,000 pounds line. But the idea there is that San Shou, half of San Shou is understanding how to do that. I say the other half of San Shou is looking at the 64 postures and finding the soft 4-ounce function in each. So instead of thinking, okay, I've learned this soft Tifang thing, I've learned how to get out of the way, but all the functions in my head are about punching and kicking. The idea is learn how the soft 4-ounce function works. When you're doing repulse monkey, don't put the guy in front of you, put him to the side. Then when he comes in and you step out of the way, he falls into emptiness. Your hand is right there, ready to push. If his feet are in the right orientation, now you're pushing across a wonderfully weak line that he'll go out a long way. So the San Shou piece has 2, right? It has understanding the hitting hands exercise and looking at every posture for a soft 4-ounce function, putting them together, it starts to change your form. My requirement for students to come into my class is they have to be able to stumble through a traditional family form. Right? Because if they have any more of that, when I show them what rollback's doing, what press is doing, what split is doing, it changes how they're actually doing the form, because they're no longer seeing it as dance or, you know, this will be aligned in front of here, below here, but they start seeing it from an energetic functional point. Oh, the guy's running away and I'm pushing through, and my follow step is, you know, my adjustment step is the acceleration of him away. So San Shou is a little bigger in my mind than that. That's the statement on San Shou, but I didn't get quite what you wanted to touch with on Xingyi also.
Well, because that's, I think of that as a 5-element aspect to the practice. And so that you had mapped out in the larger system, San Shou with the 5 elements where, I was thinking that, and that was a surprise for me because that's where I would have put Xingyi.
Right. And you do it. Remember, these are frameworks, right? So if you have a set of 5, I've got 5 fingers, I could put fire, earth, metal, water, wood, and I could use that, right? In fact, oftentimes I'll do this to my students, say, Xingyi, and they'll look at me like I'm crazy, but in my mind, this makes sense, right? There's 5 pieces. So it's simply an organizational framework. They've taken 5 and they've put it on it. In Taiji, they have the 5 steps. In Xingyi, they simply have that. Xingyi has 5 5 fist and 12 animal forms. So you get 2 frameworks there. Bagua has 24 standing exercises, 64 linear exercises, and 8 changes on the circle. That's all around the sets of 8, right? But so the idea is that these frameworks are simply organizational structures that they're placed on. So Xingyi and San Shou have that same framework of 5.
And the 5 elements, you know, the sort of creation, destruction, or
That cycle is the same. Yep.
right, that those interlocking cycles that fold in and entwine with each other is kind of like related to push hands and
Yep. And Professor says that it's yin and yang mutually rubbing against each other and exchanging, right? So read page, I was going to say this, but read page 85, 86, and he goes all through that. And at the end, he says, and the rest is obvious. So you've got homework to do.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thanks. Jill Basso, you want to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate it. I do practice Dalu and teach it. So, but what I've seen is that sometimes it's called, what confuses me is that sometimes it's called the big rollback and sometimes it's called Dalu. Why is it called the big rollback?
Well, Dalu is big rollback. That's literally what it means. Da big lu bung lu jian. So ward off, rollback, press, push. It is literally big rollback. Do I have a copy of my book here? Yeah. So for the Chinese speaker, that's big rollback. Literally Dalu. Right? Yep. We got some head shaking there from the folks.
Are they synonymous then?
Yeah, they're actually just an English translation. Right, so we've Romanized Dalu we've Romanized it's a Dalu, D-A-L-U or T-A-L-U, but they are it's just translated, right? It's like ward off is bung, right? Lu, bung lu, jian, right? Bung lu jian. You've heard those sounds before. That's actually Chinese. Yeah. And I'm saying that because I don't know anything about Chinese, but we've heard those sounds before. But the lu, the combing, is the big rollback, Dalu.
So it has nothing to do with the posture of rollback.
No, it has to do with the function of rollback. If you read what Professor says on, again, 13 treatises, on the function of rollback, is he talks about how it invites the other in deeply into your trap, right? So the idea is it's not something done immediately, it's something done as you draw him in. And he says you draw him in to off balance him. Once he's off balance, you've got T, right? He's looking for balance. You cause the gravity at his center of balance to be off. It's not like he's falling over. He's just a little bit off. So the application of rollback isn't this or isn't this. You know, one was push hands, one was Dalu. The application of rollback is to draw him in deeply. This is a song of hitting hands. It says draw in and touch. You want him to come in deeply because Professor does it with this piece of silk idea, right? An arrow can't pierce a piece of silk if it's not in its root, right? A spent arrow does nothing to it. So Dalu's big rollback is to invite them in deeply into your trap. Is that helpful? We got a head shake, good.
Yeah, if you think about the translation of rollback as that, then you're discussing it as an energy of the Dalu practice. Is that correct?
Yes, of Taiji practice. I'd expand it and say both of them. If you think about, I don't know, you said you did Dalu. Your responses to shoulder is big rollback. Your response to split is big ward off. You're basically doing the same 2 postures and push hands as you do in Dalu. It's just that they're bigger. You actually step back and you actually roll back big. You're doing the same thing. You just expanded it to the upper and lower coordinated. This is the second line in Song of Hitting Hands. The upper and lower are coordinated. That's all. You have a fixed step posture and you have a moving step posture. It's all Dalu's doing. It's the same thing. When people say, oh, you should be able to get it from push hands, it's because the same thing's in push hands, right? It's roll back and ward off. The same thing in Dalu.
Okay. Redmond, did we get Tom's question?
Yeah, there's a message from Tom. Let me just get it.
You want to go ahead and read that?
Okay, so doing Dalu, flowing through it, we would take turns stopping, pausing, and starting again to help each other not anticipate the moves. your thoughts.
Spot on. Yeah. Remember, I would say that the idea is that you're trying to figure out the moment of commitment. So if you're just flowing through it, eventually you're not paying attention to it. You're just flowing through, hey, how the wife and the kids, how's work, everything's fine. And you're just cycling around and you're not paying attention. The sincerity that's required in the exercises. Mr. Smith talked about the sincerity of it through, does it change your character? It's this big question to Professor Jung, does it change the character? And Mr. Smith told us, he came down on the side of the sincerity that's required in Taiji to get Taiji changes the temperament, changes the person, right? And I think that goes very well with the idea that when he pulls, if I ride the pull, come up to shoulder, but I don't shoulder. If he's not listening and starts rolling back, he's going to step back and be a stationary target that I can hit. Same thing in push hands, right? If you're just going through push hands and somebody stops and the other person keeps going, right? You're not listening, right? Tingjin, you're not hearing what's supposed to happen. So I absolutely, yes, keep doing that. I would say it's a wonderful thing.
There's also
Tom,
an earlier
question.
Tom,
did that answer your question there? I see your hand, but I don't see you. Anyway, if it didn't, feel free to type another follow-up question into chat. Go ahead, Redmond. Sorry to interrupt you.
There's an earlier question asking what is split, and then also also elbow and pull.
Excellent. So the easiest way to think about it, and if you're asking what is split, I'm going to go for the easiest solution. Think of brush knee, right? When you come in and brush knee, you get the pie in the face, you get split. If you just think about brush knee being split, right, it helps you with the idea. When you split and do the follow step, the adjustment step, you're pushing through, right? Easiest way to think about what is split. In the Dalu form, it's me being the bad guy and putting momentum in there. I'm trying to hit the person and they're getting out of the way, so I fall into emptiness. You mentioned two others, Redmond?
Elbow and pull.
Okay. Pull is, we read it on page 85. The idea is that you're testing the substantiality. So when I come in to hit and I fall in the emptiness, if you pull on that, my momentum plus your gentle pull, single whip has this, right? My momentum plus your gentle pull will throw me out, right? He says, no man will not fall down. He says that a lot. Every time you see that, you should highlight it and reference it. No man will not fall down. He will go out a great distance. These statements, right? Page 85, he says this, you're going to go out. So pull is the idea of it's sort of Tifang in reverse, right? If he's pulling away and you push, great. But if he's coming in, you get out of the way and you pull, you'll carry him through. You'll take his momentum plus your pull, and you'll be both going in the same direction. Elbow, as I say in the Dalu book, is a game-ending posture. So the idea that he's coming in to do pie in the face and you stick your elbow out there, just like Professor had in the picture, and it clotheslines him. He says it's used to attack vital points. In chapter 7, Professor writes that is an isosceles triangle. It's a wedge. And he says these words, the classics say attract, emptiness, join, and discharge. This, the wedge, is a different method. So he's making the point that when you come in, even as the bad guy coming in, to go into detail, if I come in and I push with the front hand as I go to hit, all he's doing is saying, oh, I'm going to lift it up and let it fall off and have the elbow hit you. So elbow is a game-ending technique. It's sort of advanced. You don't see it in the normal cycle, but it's attacking vital points, right? You're hitting him with an elbow somewhere along this center line or wherever he happens to hit. So that's the explanation of that. Sorry, that was so long.
Okay. Katie, did you have another comment?
Yes, I'm disagreed about the, my father not teaching Dalu. He teach in New York. I saw he teach, and but the practice Dalu is less than push hand. Actually, Dalu is important also because 8 different direction, right? Bagua, 8 different direction. So
right, and I think that's where the idea.
Yeah.
I think that's the idea of where people felt like it wasn't taught in New York, is it wasn't practiced as much. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But you
Right.
know, Dali is more like a fixed movement, like dancing over and over. But push and have a more different things to learn. That's why practice Dali is less. And also inside the Dali, the pull actually is not pull. It's how to you manage your hands functionally. You know, your thumb is holding the opponent's little finger. You don't need to use a very strong, but the thumb is is stronger than the little finger.
It's not a yank. It's not a yank.
About 10 fingers. Yeah.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Katie. Liam, do you have another comment or question?
Actually, I have three. I'd like to add a little bit to what's been said. The first one is that the moment of commitment, which you're looking for, there are actually two moments of commitment. It's part of the classical teaching in several martial arts that there are three moments when even an expert person is vulnerable. And the first one is when they have completed a movement, because at that point they have to withdraw and regather and replan. So this is the third opening. The second opening is when they've physically committed at the beginning of a movement. And the first opening, which is the one which reveals expertise, is when they've mentally committed to it, but it hasn't emerged from their body yet. So in the Dalu, you get to practice both of these, both of the high level, but you can also practice this in the push hands. And it's best in the push hands if you're aware of when they're mentally committed. You're given this very easy circumstance to find mental commitment. And then you neutralize it when you reach the second opening.
Good. If I can real quick comment, just an interjection. That's heaven level 2 when he talks about being able to hear them move before they move. And
Yep.
page 94, 13 treatises when he talks about the counterattack, where the person realizes they're in trouble and retreats. So you're right on track with not only other classical martial arts, but what's in the book too. It's wonderful. Thank you, sir.
So continuing with the business of being on track with other classical martial arts, when I was taught fencing, what I was taught, and this is international Western fencing, the sport, I was taught that in order to do the parry correctly, when the other person is moving forward, you must begin by retreating in order to lengthen the time for the parry, and then you can riposte because you've obtained the line. In karate, I was taught yield and then snap back. In judo, I was taught when you're pushed, pull, and so on. So this principle appears any place that you find something which is effective. Just simply trying to overpower the other person, that's not going to work against somebody who understands this principle.
If I can interject right there, the professor talked about that with the silk, right? Moving that piece of silk, increasing the time and the distance that it travels through, right?
I never heard the silk talk, but
it's in 13 treatises.
The last thing, I guess, is about the elbow. I was there for a lecture that professor gave when he told the class, no offense meant to anybody by saying this, that even a woman or a small child can kill you with either of two weapons. And one weapon is the heel of the foot and the other is the elbow. So learning the elbow is important, and it's hidden actually in a couple of places in the form. But the place where I try to bring it out to my students is in the punch, because the form of the punch is precisely what's called a reinforced elbow, which is the hand that's following the fist is there in order to back it up in much the same way that the swordsman's talisman is there to back up the blade if it's necessary. All done. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Excellent. Helpful.
Great. Thanks, Liam.
There's a few questions in the chat.
You want to go ahead and read them off?
Yeah. So from Alan, Thank you, Stephen. You refer to what we consider to be Dalu number 1. Do you work on the other Dalu forms too?
Redmond, who's that from?
From Alan. Alan, if you're there, do you want to clarify?
I'm just interested in who the we is.
I think
because,
where he studies. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mr. Smith taught 2 versions of Dalu, one through professor's school and the other through Wang Yin In's. And so I'm radically tied to 13 treatises, so I do my best to stay with professor stuff. The other one I don't like as much. There's a bit of pushing and shoving, and I try to stay away from that. So I'd love to, if there's a video or something, I'd love to see what their second version is. It'd be wonderful to see it.
Okay. There's another question from. Hi, is it Alan? Hi, Alan.
Yeah. Hi, Stephen. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I just wanted to say that many of us in the UK learnt 4 kind of different forms of the Dalu via the lineage of Dr. Chi-Ching Dao, who I believe was one of the professor's students in Tai Chi. They're in kind of varying degrees of complexity. 4th one is, I believe there might even be a 5th one. They're a little bit rusty now, but yeah, they are available. They have been practiced.
Fantastic. Yeah. If you back channel and if you know where a video or a book is on it, I'd love to see it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Right. I'll check that out, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no. It's all research, right? We're trying to figure this stuff out. And if people have bits and pieces or they've created something that's very helpful, we're interested in it. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Alan.
There's another question from Francois and reiterated by Julie Wolf. Sincerity, what do you mean by sincerity required?
Mr. Smith, gosh, I'm trying to think of how he said this. So I've started the sentence and I've caught myself in it. But he talked about doing things by rote and how you don't want to do that. You don't want to just be like, yeah, I'm not really paying attention to it, but you really have to be sincere in the practice. And that doesn't mean that you walk into the practice with some sense of, I've reached a level of enlightenment or anything like that, but it means sincerely doing it. My buddy Chris Oxtetter says, if you haven't done the exercise, you haven't done the exercise. Like, I think it's that simple. That sincerity is, did I do what it told me to do? Did I do what my teacher told me to do? Did I practice those things? And being, I think sometimes the first line in Song of Hitting Hands is translated as ward off, roll back, press, push must be done conscientiously, right? It must be done with that full concentration. And I think that Renjin idea, the idea that it is sincere, it is a full concentration, it is sincerity, is what I'm talking about. Mindfulness. Somebody just I saw the chat pop up. It said mindfulness. Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
There's a few more questions, but maybe if you want to go to who has a raised hand
Russ,
first.
did you have another comment you wanted to make or a question? Russ.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks to Stephen for his comment there about conscientiously. The classics tell us study conscientiously. I was told that by my teachers. All those ideas that Stephen just brought out. He beat me to the punch on that. I also wanted to mention one thing in connection with what Liam was saying about the 3 vulnerabilities, the 3 opportunities. If you look at Mr. Smith and Ben Lowe's article, actually Mr. Smith's article in JAMA, it's called Dalu and Some Tigers. So there's an interesting application of step back, retreat to ride the tiger in there, which is taking advantage of that opportunity when the person is transitioning. If they're putting weight in the front foot, you can scoop that foot, use step back, ride the tiger, and that split becomes a throw. So there are lots of places there to test the reactions of your partner and to be tested. And it's a really fruitful exercise. Thanks a lot. Good discussion.
Great. Thank you. Dave Liebson, you got your hand up. Did you have a question or comment?
I did. Thank you, Stephen. Great stuff.
Hi, Dave.
My question has to do with the speed of the practice. In push hands, we tend it can be done very quickly, but we tend to move very slowly and consciously with, I think, an emphasis on the sensing. In Dalu, as people are doing it, and as I watch people doing it, and even in your little video that you showed earlier, moving at a more rapid pace. And I'm just wondering, is there some reason for that? Or is it a matter of people doing Dalu tend to be more advanced and so can sense more quickly?
Sure. The best way for me to sort of address this is to sort of figure out, the classics say no speed, no strength, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we're gonna do Kung Fu with no speed, no strength to be stylistic about it, right? It literally is saying that adding more speed and adding more strength aren't helpful, right?
Are helpful or are not?
Are not helpful. Doing Tifang faster, actually, it's like accelerating faster. At some point, acceleration on top of acceleration becomes a jerk. And I was always told, don't be a jerk, right? So I got a couple of smiles I can see, good. So the idea that push hands is dealing with strength, right? At first you're at 4 ounces. This is Mr. Smith writing in Masters of Methods, page 33, right? That you don't put any force on them. Don't let them put any force on you. Professor says, if this is followed, mastery will come, few follow it. So there's a bit of a jeering at us for that. But the idea that push hands deals with strength. And so at first you're very soft, but once you get him in T, you realize he can push as hard as he wants. If you have him in T, you're just standing like a mountain and then you flow like a great river, right? You T and then Fong. That's what stand like a mountain, flow like a river is telling us. Dalu works on, so push hands works on speed, or on strength, sorry. Dalu works on speed. Remember, if you can, as Liam was pointing out, identify the 2 moments before the attack is sprung, right? You actually have more time. In other words, if I think, here's my imitation of a boxer. If I think that my attack started here, but you view my attack as starting here, you actually have more time. And so in Dalu, we're working on the idea of speed and increasing your understanding of that, chunking it, as one might say. And so in Dalu, I'm trying to hit you with real energy. And push hands, we don't use real energy. We stay at 4 ounces. We get this, the 4 postures cycling over and over again is sort of the substrate that Tifang floats on. When you find the mistake, you don't do more rollback. You don't do more push. You Tifang, right? You yield and withdraw and push. In Dalu, I'm trying to put momentum on it. I'm trying to hit them. The other person steps back and get out of the way. So eventually you work at speed, you work at hooks, you work uppercuts, you try to expand the practice such that the other person says, I don't care what the attack is, like the bull coming to the matador. I just care that I know when he started and I'm going to get out of the way when he gets here. So after the attack, his own momentum is pulling off. Is that helpful?
Perfect, very helpful.
Okay, good. Sorry, a little long there.
So we're winding down our time. Redmond, are there other written questions we need to
Yeah,
address?
there's one more question. I think J. Augusto says, did Professor teach San Shou in a structured way? I think not, as he presented it in his books as just free form. But yeah, I think that's the first question. Did Professor teach San Shou in a structured way?
Well, my statement would be that if I look at all of the writings that have it in it, there is a structure. That from the classics, there is a structure. If you look at Professor, when he talks in San Shou, he talks about familiar. So there's a curriculum, and then there is a skill set, and they are separate, right? So the curriculum, form, push hands, Dalu, San Shou, the curriculum's there, and then weapons and stuff afterward. The skill set of heaven, earth, man, right, or man, apostrophe man, human, but man, earth, and heaven. Man is opening the body, getting the body loose, moving around. The second one is getting earth, chi, into the hand. So when they push, I can stand like a mountain. And the third one down is listening, right? Is the realm of the sensation. So I always see the curriculum and the skill set played out in what Professor at least has written and talked about. So I didn't study with him, and the New York School folks would have to answer that. But what he wrote us was do the form, do the structure, do the exercises in this way. So that's all I can address.
There is one more question from David Bear, and he's asking, in this time when we can't meet each other and practice two people work, are there specific exercises one can practice solo for Dalu?
Yeah, Taiji. Right, do the form. And it sounds like a flippant answer, but if you do the form and you know that this is ward off left, that's single-handed push hands, this is ward off right, roll back, press, push, that's a cycle of push hands. You can use your imagination to work on push hands. If you get my book, I actually show the Dalu form. So if you want to practice the Dalu form without a partner, that's possible too. It's just, it literally is the down block parry punch without the down block parry punch part, right? You're doing split, you ride the pull, you shoulder, you lift elbow, that's it. So it's in the form, do the form, but you can pull out the Dalu form itself, like you can do a push hands form by itself. You can pull those out and practice those. Yeah, the COVID is a weird world we live in.
Stephen, there have been a lot of requests to put a link to your book in the chat. Would you be able to do that before we close as well?
Any other questions before we close out? Going once, going twice. Okay, so while Stephen's putting, Russ, did you have a comment or question? Go ahead.
Just a quick comment in response to the question about whether Professor taught Dalu in a structured way. Of course, I didn't get to meet the professor, but his senior students that I worked with did. Mr. Smith, Ben Lowe, JJ Sung in Taiwan, and other people. Yeah, definitely part of the curriculum, taught in a structured way and done very similarly by the various teachers I got to meet.
I think the question was, did he teach San Shou in that way? Do you know?
Oh, San Shou. Yeah. Different, totally different subject. I don't know that professor did. He calls it free fighting, but other teachers who got it from Shaohao lineage did teach a choreographed sequence.
Yeah, Professor writes in 13 treatises that San Shou has no particular method, no particular form. So push hands has 4 postures, Dalu has 4 postures, San Shou doesn't. And I think the photographs that I was showing earlier is the song of hitting hands approach to practicing it. Let him come in and attack with great strength, do Dalu, do Tifang, and you've got it. So it seems to be, at least in the writings, that he's moving towards that. And he goes beyond it, Professor goes beyond it, talking about receiving energy, which is adhere, listen, Ti, and Fang, all in it in an instant. And he even has talking about it there. So there's more than just the San Shou piece of it as far as working with the energy, but that's in his writings.
Well, Stephen, I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody so much for your time, for your dedication to all this and putting it together into a very, very good presentation. So thank you, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for having this forum. I think bringing the people together and sharing information in this scholarly way is wonderful. Thank you.
Great, appreciate it. Just a quick reminder to everyone, as we go through this fall session, we are meeting on an every other week schedule. So our next session will be on November 17th rather than next week, November 10th. On November 17th, Julian Chu is going to present his new translation of Professor Cheng's article, quote, New Notion on Tai Chi Chuan Movement, that was published by Ben Lowe. I don't know when it was originally published. Do you know, Redmond?
Yeah, I believe in 1985.
Okay, so from 1985, that article, Julian has a new translation of it, and he's going to present that in the session on November 17th. Again, thank you to Stephen. Thank you to everyone who attends these sessions. We appreciate you lending your support to the forum and helping us to continue until we can get back to some sort of a normal Tai Chi world. So thanks again. Hope to see you in 2 weeks. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.